Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart. For today's video, I would like to start off by talking about some of the date ranges for some of Nintendo's most popular consoles ever. For the Famicom, it launched on July 15th, 1983. Its successor, the Super Famicom, launched on November 21st, 1990. This was a 7-year and 4-month gap. The Game Boy launched on April 21st, 1989. It was followed up by the Game Boy Color on October 21st, 1998, a 9-year and 6-month gap. Now, Nintendo doesn't include the Game Boy and Game Boy Colors as its own sales altogether, so maybe you might want to look at the Game Boy Advance as the true successor to the Game Boy. That launched on March 21st, 2001, a total of 11 years and 11 months. For Nintendo's most successful piece of hardware ever, the Nintendo DS, it launched on November 21st, 2004. It was followed up by the Nintendo 3DS, which first released February 26, 2011, a 6-year and 3-month gap. The Nintendo Wii, Nintendo's most successful home console ever, before the Switch, launched on November 19th, 2006. It was followed up by the Wii U on November 18th, 2012, a 6-year gap. And here we are with the Nintendo Switch, which launched on March 3rd, 2017, and we are still waiting for the successor, and the latest bits of information from all the reputable outlets are now suggesting that it won't launch until after March 2025. In other words, we are looking at more than 8 years of a gap here, which will be the longest gap ever, not counting the Game Boy, which came out in the infancy of the handheld market, where I really don't think you should be looking at trends from that point in time. So it's been a very, very long wait. So what's going on with all these rumors and reports, and when will Nintendo Switch 2 actually come out? That's what we're talking about today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So just a couple days ago, a lot of us in the Nintendo speculation community were filled with a great deal of optimism because a podcast came out from a known, respected journalist, Brazil. Apparently, some presentations are going to be happening very soon, and not in the typical September window of time, suggesting that a Switch 2 reveal could also be following that not too far afterwards. And he also provided his opinion that he thinks Switch 2 will be revealed and released in a similar way to Switch 1. Similar, not the same, just so we're clear there. But then shortly afterwards, Chris String, during the gamesindustry.biz podcast, said this.
James made a comment about how people seem to think it's coming out in March next year, and I thought, no, nobody thinks that really. And it turns out people do think that. And I just wanted to say, I'm going to say now that console is not coming out before in this financial year. And I'm saying this for two reasons. One, when Nintendo revealed their financials, they said they were going to announce the successor to the Switch in the next financial year. They didn't say they were going to release it. In previous financial years, when they have released a new console, they normally say they're going to release a new console. They did for the NX, as it was called before it became the Switch. This time they haven't done that. They've just said they're going to announce it. So that was a big, big clue. The second one is that no developer I've spoken to expects it to be launching this in the financial year. In fact, they've been told not to expect it in the financial year. A bunch of people I spoke to hope it's out in April, May time, still early next year, not late.
So essentially, according to the developers that Chris String speaks to, they all think the Switch 2 is not releasing in this current fiscal year, and they are hoping it comes out in the April-May time. And so this information certainly caught a fair bit of fire, and even Eurogamer followed up and corroborated this information. Hope fades for a Switch 2 launch in early 2025, won't release before April next year, report states. And even Takashi Mochizuki, who's a reporter over at Bloomberg, said this. There is an article from overseas that Nintendo's next generation console will not be released this fiscal year. Indeed, at the beginning of this year, it was said it could be released as early as March of next year, but recently fewer people are considering March as a possibility. So to clear up something here, because I think some people might miss what's being said here, Chris Dring is the one saying that from what he's heard from developers, March is not the time, it's going to be some time afterwards. How much afterwards remains to be seen, and Eurogamer is now corroborating that information. But Takashi Mochizuki is simply stating that fewer people are considering March as a possibility, and that's a little different. Takashi Mochizuki is suggesting that March is still possible, but saying it's unlikely. So I think it's important to distinguish those differences there. But there is someone else who has spoken on this situation regarding Switch 2's release timing. Nate Drake, also known as Nate the Hate on his podcast on YouTube and other places, he said this: "And my opinion is still first half 2025, we shall see if Gamescom chatter changes it. No report or claim this week has moved a single thing beyond the first half of 2025. If anything, the claims simply back the report from Nikkei earlier this year saying that March was the earliest release possibility. Little to nothing has changed time-wise." And I think there's an important point being made by Nate Drake here, because when we look at something like what Chris Dring is saying about how some developers are hoping April for May, when he just says hope to me isn't we think, it's we hope, and it could take longer. So when we take a look at things being said by Mochizuki, who's still erring on the small possibility of a March release but thinking it's unlikely, and then people like Nate suggesting that it should still probably happen in the first half based off what they think, there's still some optimism there. And I would say that April or May, those are still reasonable release times. That's not that much later, not a big deal. But there's something else that should be noted here. Chris Dring has gotten things wrong in the past. Many times, in fact, especially when it comes to Nintendo things. So my friend Nintendo Prime actually discussed some of these things on one of his recent videos. I'll be linking that as well in the description below. He did a great job of pointing out a lot of the times that Chris Dring has been incorrect. So for example, this time, there was a poll about a June 2023 Nintendo Direct at the beginning of June, and Chris Dring said, nope. Well, he was wrong. We had a June Nintendo Direct, and it was one of the best ones yet. Here, Chris Dring said, there will be a good reason why they didn't. But if what I hear is true about Nintendo's post-Zelda lineup, there isn't one, those games could play a key role next year. So this goes back to that conversation that Tears of the Kingdom was supposedly going to be the last big or significant Switch game, and it wasn't just Chris talking about this, also Andy Robinson from Video Games Chronicle. Except, after Tears of the Kingdom, we've gotten games like Pikmin 4, Mario Wonder, we're getting The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom next month, Super Mario Party Jamboree, a series that sold 10+ million with each of its entries on Switch, this version being the biggest yet, is coming out just after Zelda. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is coming out next year, as is Pokemon Legends ZA. So we have games that have big scopes, that have really expensive budgets, that are high quality, and that have sold a lot or have a chance to sell a lot. So I'm not sure what you count as a big game. I feel like they were just wrong here. And then here Chris Dring says, I'm not convinced Wonder is a big release as people think. There are a lot of Mario games on Switch I am told is made by the Mario C team. I think it'll sell well, I don't think it'll shift that many consoles. The Mario C team. In hindsight, Mario Wonder sold extremely well. Nintendo actually exceeded their forecast a little bit from last financial year, and Mario Wonder had something to do with that. Mario Wonder is not a C team game, it's made by Nintendo EPD, it's made by the mainline 2D Mario team, and they've been polishing and working on this game for years. I think Chris is just wrong in this case. I think he was misled by whoever told him that it's made by the C team. So I bring all these things up to say that while Chris Dring may be right about Switch 2, it wouldn't be the first time he was told from people that would know and was still wrong. So let's take this rumor with a grain of salt. But then also there's been a lot of conversation that this whole March 2025 thing was never a thing. Even Chris Dring said it in his podcast. And it is a thing. It was always a thing. We had multiple reputable outlets suggesting Q1 of 2025 earlier this year. Video Games Chronicle. Since publishing this story, VGC has heard from multiple sources who said Nintendo has told its publishers next console will now launch in Q1 2025. And then we have Eurogamer saying the same thing, Q1 of 2025. They are corroborating the story for VGC. This all happened earlier this year. And so now Eurogamer is saying that March is not a thing. But they were saying it was a thing here. And let's also point out that before these updates about the Switch 2 coming out in Q1, it was coming out in 2024. So these outlets are telling us release times, updating it because it changed, it was delayed, and now it's not even discussed as a delay, it's just different. So what I'm trying to say here isn't that we shouldn't trust gamesindustry.biz or Takashi Mochizuki or Eurogamer or Video Games Chronicle, but like with any rumor, report, or leak, whatever you want to call it, if it's information that has to do with something that's yet to have been officially confirmed, it is subject to change or misinterpretation or even potentially leak bait. That's also a possibility. So you gotta be cautious with this info and you have to try and think for yourself. Take the evidence, consider it, but come to your own conclusions. And what's also interesting about all of this is that Brazil, the person that gave us the interesting, exciting news earlier this weekend, they were the initial report about the initial Switch 2 internal delay earlier this year that all these other outlets decided to piggyback on after the fact, but Brazil isn't making any clarifications about not being Q1 anymore, but a little bit afterwards. But to also be clear, not every outlet was saying that it was going to be March 2025. Some outlets were, like Eurogamer and Video Games Chronicle. But you have outlets like Nikkei that were just saying March 2025 at the earliest, which also lines up with what Takashi Mochizuki is currently saying now. So then, with all of this in mind, what is actually going on? I think this is a situation where, as we get closer to things actually happening, a little bit more people are a little bit more aware, there's a little bit more information out there, and things start to get a bit more clear. In other words, you have some developers that are unsure or have maybe a sense of where things are going, but they themselves still may not be totally aware of what's going on. Not all developers are going to be treated equal here. Some are going to know things, some are not going to know things. It kind of depends on when they were brought into the fold. And also, Nintendo may have not even told a lot of developers when the console's coming out yet. Sometimes these release dates are kept close to the chest, but what has been made clear is that Nintendo will at least announce the console within the fiscal year. And a lot of people like to treat this as, oh, that means it's being announced at the very end of the fiscal year. But that's not what that means. It's possibly going to be announced at the very end of the fiscal year, but it also could happen anytime between now and then. It's a window of time. And so with a window of time, that's exactly what it means. There's also something similar to when we've heard those reports about March 2025 at the earliest. March at the earliest means, yeah, March is possible, but it's not guaranteed. It could happen later. But this is what I think is going down. At the very latest, I think Nintendo's going to give us a proper announcement of the console before the end of the fiscal year, because that's what they told us. By announcement, I think it's going to be something significant, because technically, they already made an announcement that they're going to make an announcement. I don't think this announcement is going to just be another thing on Twitter. It's going to be something significant. I think most likely a reveal trailer. And if that's the case, I have a hard time imagining that they would have an extremely long window between reveal and release. For Nintendo Switch, they gave us a teaser trailer October 20th of 2016. 19 weeks later, the console launched March 3rd of 2017. Essentially 4.5 months. So with that in mind, let's say we get the reveal trailer on the very last day of March, which makes no sense by the way, but if that's when it comes, we wait 4.5 months, that's April, May, June, July, puts us smack dab in the middle of August. That's kind of the latest I sort of envision Switch 2 coming out. Now maybe you want to think that they'll have a longer reveal to release window. Why might they do that? I'd argue that they could have a shorter one, because if they are following up the Switch, there's even less to really teach us, because it's essentially a more powerful Switch with some improvements and such. But let's say for whatever reason, instead of it being the same or shorter, it's longer, How much longer? What's a reasonable amount of time? I don't think it's 9 months. I think that's ridiculous. Let's say 6. 6 months puts us towards the end of September, early October. But if we account for the fact that it's extremely unrealistic that they would actually announce the Switch 2 on the very last day of March, then it's probably September at the very latest, which would be the end of summer. And if we have to wait that long, I think it would mostly come down to Nintendo wanting to build up as much stock as possible so they can meet demand upon launch. And maybe that's why we would have a longer reveal to release window, but I do think Nintendo would want to reveal the console sooner than later because they want to avoid leaks. Nintendo lately has seemingly done a better job of locking down on leaks. With the recent June Direct, there weren't too many leaks. There were insiders or leakers suggesting it wouldn't be that exciting, like Pyoro, and what happened? It was actually a very exciting Direct, and Pyoro is no longer leaking things. Nintendo may be keeping things under wraps. And like the June Direct, just because we're not hearing anything now doesn't mean good things aren't going to happen. So while yes, it's possible we have to wait till the second half of next year, I think it's unlikely. I think the first half of 2025 is still pretty reasonable, but we'll see as more evidence presents itself. As I said earlier, April or May, not really too different from March. Really all I'm waiting for right now is a reveal. I will say that if it's coming out April or later, that strengthens the argument for a reveal happening next year. But what I think matters the most is Nintendo avoiding leaks and controlling the message. I don't think announcing Switch 2 before the holidays will really impact sales that much. Sales are already going down as it is. And Nintendo's had even bigger, more software coming out in the past when they've announced the console. Just look at the 3DS lineup in 2016. It's even bigger than the Switches for this year of 2024. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.